Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm meteorologist Michaela Smith. We have a lot to talk about in that forecast, from chances of storms over the next few days to potential snow and the coldest air of the season. So we are going to jump right in. But first, before we start that forecast, always a reminder, we're so thankful that you guys are here. So let us know wherever you're watching from. We'll pop that up on the screen just because it's fun for us to see. And if at any point in time during this forecast today you have a weather question, just let us know. Again, we'll have those questions up on the screen and we'll be able to answer those as the forecast goes on. So looking at these weather headlines for today, we can see we're talking about Friday bringing back some pretty stormy weather. Storms tomorrow could pose a threat for tornadoes, hail, and strong winds, and then that's also going to give us a chance to see some storms as we head into Saturday. Then we talk about cold air moving in this weekend. The coldest air of the season, in fact, arrives pretty much late Saturday, so you'll be feeling the effects by Sunday, and especially Monday morning, those lows look frigid. And with that cold air moving into place, also means some of us are going to see our first snowfall of the year. So we'll talk about who's going to be gearing up for the possibility of seeing some winter weather as we head towards the weekend. First, I want to show you some storm reports from yesterday. You can see this starts Tuesday, Wednesday into Thursday. A lot of just what we've been dealing with over the last several days has been rainfall, especially the Pacific Northwest. That's where we've been talking about that atmospheric river. So they were just dealing with rain after rain after rain, pretty much days of rain. It's been very gloomy out there. Yesterday, though, we started to see that switch up. More rain for areas to the northeast, and that's where we had some storm chances yesterday afternoon. Had quite a few wind reports you can see across parts of New York and Connecticut as well. And then we had a few severe thunderstorm warned storms yesterday that also had wind reports. So that's where we were focusing on, really those breezy conditions yesterday. We talked about Wednesday night going into this morning, how they had high wind warnings in effect for part of the northeast because they were expecting things to get so windy. And now we're seeing those reports coming in saying, yes, indeed it was. Current conditions right now across the U.S., you can see a few low pressure systems causing some rainfall up closer to Minneapolis, so parts of Minnesota. Still seeing rainfall for the Pacific Northwest, but a lot of us are seeing a small break in the rainfall. It's been pretty dry here for the central portion of the U.S., but we'll see those changes here as we get closer to the weekend. Starting off looking at the northeast, a few showers maybe closer to Boston this morning, coming through New York City as well. Overall, not too heavy of rainfall. It's been pretty dry the last few days when we've checked in on Florida, but you can actually see Florida now seeing some rainfall, especially more on that western coast, closer to Tampa Bay. And then you get towards the middle of the U.S., and there's a few more showers. You can see parts of Nebraska, maybe North and South Dakota. And finally, the Pacific Northwest. You've seen rain for days. Seattle, Portland, all the way to the northern parts of California. You are yet again talking about another day that things are pretty gloomy because you're getting so much rainfall. Looking at these temperatures across the U.S., you can see a lot of us sitting pretty comfortably. It's already right around noon here, central portion of the U.S., so we're in the 70s. If you're having any maybe lunchtime plans, you could consider going on a patio for today. Getting closer to the 80s now, even in Dallas, Houston as well. A little bit cooler to the north, 52 currently in Minneapolis, 60 in Billings, 56 in Portland. So it's more of a cold rain that they're dealing with out there today. Before we jump in and talk about the hail, again, at any point in time throughout this forecast, if you guys have any questions, please let us know in the comments. We're going to pop those comments up here so we can talk about the different weather headlines, because there's a lot, again, going on in the forecast today and tomorrow. For today, big thing is we don't have any significant hail expected for your Thursday forecast. Really watching for the chance for maybe a few showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. That threat is extremely limited. We're talking about if any storm was to go severe today, largest hail would be about quarter size. And even then, that's kind of a stretch. Most of that hail would be what we like to call pocket change hail. Not really expecting it to get very large for today. But then the severe weather chances start to change tomorrow. So you can see for your Thursday, things are pretty calm across the area. But then once we get to Friday, we have a marginal risk that's going to extend from the Ohio Valley down all the way towards kind of the central portion of the Gulf. So Mississippi, Alabama, parts of Florida as well. And we have a slight risk that's going to include south central Kentucky and really middle Tennessee areas like Nashville, talking about storms for tomorrow. And then once you get to Saturday, that area kind of shifts a little bit more towards the southeast. So it's really the deep south at that point. Still Mississippi, still Alabama. Now you're including parts of Georgia. So Atlanta, you're going to be in Saturday storm risk. And you can even see areas off more towards the east, getting a little bit closer all the way to the East Coast, not fully including the East Coast. But again, that's going to be something that we watch Friday into Saturday. And it all kind of depends on those storms Friday too, how much or how really those strong, those severe storm chances can be Saturday with how much kind of juice is left up in the atmosphere. So significant hail model showing you this for the next few days. Today for your Thursday, you really don't see too much starting to show up. Tomorrow, though, this is already at 3 p.m., you're starting to see these more darker grays and even getting a little bit of a peak color, more of that orange. That's what we want to start to see with that hail getting a little bit larger. Once we get away from those whites and grays, that's going to be usually pretty small hail. When you start to get into those oranges and then the reds and especially the purples, that's when we start to expect that hail size to go up. So while it's not anything outrageous for tomorrow, this is showing us that there's a chance that we could see some decently sized hail. So we're going to stop this again right around 4 p.m., showing you this first area that we're watching for that could have the potential for larger hail tomorrow. Again, southern parts of Kentucky and middle Tennessee. And then there's also another area down here in parts of Mississippi, Alabama too, that we'll have to keep a close eye on for tomorrow, especially as the night progresses. That kind of southern portion is what I'm going to be watching closely. This will try to sneak a little bit closer to maybe Tuscaloosa and Birmingham at that point. This is again right around 8 o'clock for your Friday. And then as you go into the overnight hours heading into your Saturday, you can see that risk kind of comes down a little bit more once we get into those overnight hours. So showing you that hail forecast for tomorrow, you can see where we have kind of those two areas highlighted. That first one is what we talked about. That's going to be Nashville. You're included in that. Parts of Kentucky, even down into parts of northern Alabama and Mississippi, getting really close to Tupelo at that point too. So that's that first area of concern a little bit earlier on in the afternoon. Some of those initial storms that could form could have the potential to have some larger damaging hail. Then you go to the south though, and that's that second area that we were watching that kind of around the same time a few storms could get going, but then as the evening progresses that stays moving into parts of Alabama. So that point, that's why we're talking about Birmingham and even areas more towards the south. You're going to be talking about the potential Hattiesburg too for some hail as you go towards your Friday afternoon into your Friday evening. Along with the hail chances for tomorrow, I do want to kind of pinpoint areas that would be maybe a little bit more likely. We always talk about this risk level, so you can see the size potential, but then that risk level is like, okay, you know, you could see hail, but how likely are these storms going to form? Well, Nashville, we went ahead and said that you have a moderate risk of seeing hail tomorrow just because you're kind of in the middle of this first area that we're talking about of concern. And then Hattiesburg, this is where these storms look like they might start to try to develop. So again, we talked about those initial storms that get going. As soon as they form, they could kind of have that better chance of seeing larger hail. As they form overnight, they'll eventually kind of form more of a line. At that point, not really worried about the hail threat. That would become more of a wind threat. So that's kind of where these storms begin to form in Mississippi tomorrow too. You may have a slightly higher chance, that moderate risk again, of seeing hail for tomorrow. So maximum hail size for your Friday, we went ahead and said hen egg. 2-inch size hail. That doesn't mean every single hailstone is going to be that size. In fact, most of the hailstones will probably be much less, but again, it's that maximum hail size. So in 1 or 2 isolated storms, we could see that hail potential getting a little bit higher up there for tomorrow. Along with the hail risk, there is a chance for tornadoes on Friday. This is going to extend all the way from Lexington, Kentucky through Nashville, Tupelo, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, down to Hattiesburg. So a lot of Mississippi, you can see pretty much a good chunk of Alabama too, and then a lot of middle Tennessee up to Kentucky, but this stops just before you get to Ohio or to West Virginia. So watching again this very closely for the chance for some of these storms, again, those initial storms that could spin up, that give us that larger hail. Usually we talk about that happening with supercells, which supercells, the definition of those, you know, are they are spinning. You need spinning storms to get tornadoes typically. So with that wind forecast too, very similar area. This moves slightly more eastward just because we are talking about once these storms form more of a line, that's when that wind threat will become more of the focus. So Knoxville, you're actually included in this wind forecast. Birmingham, this gets closer kind of right on the edge of Atlanta too. Charleston, West Virginia, you're included in this wind threat. So that's something we'll have to watch. You can really see almost the entire state of Alabama and getting into parts of the Florida Panhandle too. So it's going to be one of those days that we'll keep a close eye on a lot of different things that are happening. I did pinpoint a few cities again that I think just based off some of our models where those lines actually do start to form, where we could be talking about the chance for some of those stronger winds. Nashville, Birmingham, and Knoxville, again, I kind of highlighted you as just having one of those better chances as those storms move eastward tomorrow afternoon, especially tomorrow evening, and they form that line. That's where that wind risk really starts to take over. Now, before we jump away from storms tomorrow, again, does anybody have any questions in the comments? We're watching those very closely. If you have any questions, we can pop those comments up here at any point in time, and we can talk about a little bit more specific details. We just went over hail, we went over tornado threat, and we went over the wind threat for Friday. And then we also have a few storms on Saturday. But I want to jump away just yet in case there were any questions. But if there are no questions, we'll continue chugging right along. So this is the wind forecast for your Friday. Now I want to show you this future radar, to show you and talk about more of the storm chances tomorrow and then also heading into Saturday, but I also kind of want to highlight areas that could be talking about snow. So here's a playing forecast for the rest of today. 3 p.m. you're still seeing some showers getting closer to the Great Lakes. Tonight into tomorrow morning, you can see a line of storms maybe extending through parts of Chicago. Could be a very loud start to your day. They're not highlighted in that area for really severe weather potential tomorrow, but I wouldn't be shocked if we see some pretty strong wind gusts associated with this line of storms in the morning. Areas more to the north, mainly in Canada, but around the Great Lakes. That's where we could see some heavy snowfall by Friday morning as that cold front starts to move in. And then you can see in the afternoon, that's where these storms start getting going. Mississippi, Alabama, and there's that line that we talked about that's going to form across Kentucky and Tennessee, and eventually that'll go into the overnight hours and into Saturday morning. So we're going to play this again in the area that we're most concerned about for those storm chances tomorrow. Play this forward throughout the rest of today. Then we jump to right around 3, 4 o'clock tomorrow. Here are these storms starting to develop. Southern parts of Kentucky, middle Tennessee. Those are the storms, again, we're going to watch closely initially for the chance for larger hail. But I also want to pinpoint that some of our models have been pretty consistent about putting 1 or 2 isolated storms, more supercell type storms, down here in parts of Mississippi going into Alabama. Again, that's why we put Hattiesburg on the map earlier and just talked about the threat that also could produce some larger hail in this location. So this is right around 7 o'clock now, still seeing a few storms more towards the south. These are all in Alabama now. And you can see this line more clearly forming all across western Virginia, Kentucky, still middle Tennessee, down northern Alabama into parts of Mississippi. That'll move through overnight Friday into Saturday morning. You're still seeing some leftover showers and storms Saturday, and then depending on how much kind of storm energy is left after those morning storms, we could be talking about storms again possibly Saturday afternoon. So that's kind of that first round I want to show you. That was with our model we call the HER. I like to show you 2 different model runs too, just to kind of give you an area highlighting and how these different forecast models like to handle some of these storm situations. So the one we're looking at now is called the graph, and this is kind of very similar again. It's highlighting an area tomorrow afternoon. Parts of Mississippi into Alabama. This is right around 4 o'clock. And it's also showing these storms starting to develop across Kentucky and Tennessee. Then we get to about 7:30, and this one's a little bit more aggressive with those storms in the southern parts of Kentucky and Tennessee, middle Tennessee. So that's why we're still watching for this area for the potential for large hail and maybe a few tornadoes tomorrow. But there's still storms that are down here in parts of Alabama. Then you get overnight, this is getting closer to about midnight Friday, and this line of storms, so Knoxville moving into parts of North Carolina and South Carolina eventually, that's what we're watching for, some pretty windy conditions, and then you head into Saturday morning. Still a few showers and storms to start Saturday, but then how quickly those clear, again, we'll see some storms try to kind of refire up as you head towards Saturday afternoon. You can kind of see that this is right around 12:30 at that point. We're starting to see few little pinpoints here, especially in parts of Georgia. And then as you head more towards the afternoon, this is right around 5 o'clock. Now you're seeing a few more of these storms trying to develop Saturday evening. Big wide view again for the day tomorrow through Saturday. I want to highlight this little low pressure system that's also going to start to dig down with our cold front because it's going to start to bring some snow. So a lot of us to the north talking about seeing our first snowfall this weekend starting Friday, heading into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. You can see this here too. This is by about 11 a.m. Saturday morning. Check this out, seeing an area that this could be bringing some snowfall across parts of the U.S. This is just one model that again I'm showing you, but closer to the Great Lakes. So you're talking about Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois potentially. You could be seeing some snowfall as you head towards this weekend. Chicago too, I've seen a few discussions kind of mentioning around the Chicago area for lake effect snow. And that could make travel plans just a little bit more difficult as you go throughout the weekend. Any questions so far? Are we still doing good? I haven't seen any questions pop up over here, so I think so far, hopefully this forecast is pretty digestible. Looking at your flood outlook for today, where we've been talking about that atmospheric river that's just bringing rain after rain, day after day, there's still the chance for flooding in parts of Washington and then along the southern parts of the Oregon and Northern California coast. At that point, it's only a level 1 risk, so isolated flash flooding is possible. Not overly really concerned with that flash flooding potential anymore, just because there's been so much rainfall the last few days, but we're getting kind of towards the tail end of it now at this point. And then you get a wide view, not expecting any flooding concerns tomorrow for Friday, or as you head throughout the rest of the weekend on Saturday, even into Sunday as well, not really concerned about the flash flooding potential. I do want to show you this 5-day rain forecast just so you can kind of see. Rain is starting to kind of come back to more of the eastern half of the U.S. Still pretty dry for a lot of us here in the plains, so Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. You're not getting a ton of rain over the next 5 days, but east of there, hey, things look pretty wet. Areas like the Great Lakes, Chicago, Toronto, Washington, New York, Atlanta, even all the way down to Florida, talking about some pretty decent rainfall over the next 5 days. One thing that we jump away from land here for just a second is I want to just show you that we are not expecting any tropical activity still in the next 7 days. Hurricane season is still ongoing, goes until the end of November. If we were to have one more storm or two more storms form, our next named storm would be Nestor, but at this point, again, not expecting any cyclone formation in the next 7 days. And climatologically speaking, we are well past the peak of hurricane season. That's around the middle of September. Even in October, things can still stay pretty busy. So we had that major hurricane Melissa that made landfall in Jamaica. That was in October. So even though it was later in October, it's totally not uncommon because again, you can see that we have activity all the way through the end of November. November 30th is the official last day of hurricane season. But even usually that first week or so, first week or two, we still usually see some activity. And then at that point, you get a pretty big drop off. So the fact that it's already November 6th, haven't seen any tropical activity for the first week or so of November, not expecting any for the next 7 days, is a good sign, at least for me. Here again is currently where you are right now, so just a little bit past November 1st. Now let's talk about this weekend and the cold. We talked about how that cold front's going to bring storm chances Friday and Saturday, but it's also going to bring the coldest air that we've seen so far this season for a lot of us. But before that cold arrives, things are still going to be pleasant for the rest of today and for your Friday. So here's a look at Thursday. A lot of us are actually dealing with warmer than average conditions across the area. You see this temperatures from normal. We're kind of seeing more of these yellows and oranges and reds. That's 10 to 20 degrees above average. Now again, we're not talking about 100s this afternoon. If your average is usually sitting in the 60s, now okay, you're in the mid 70s this afternoon. Personally, feels great. But you can also see areas more towards the northeast where temperatures today are a little bit cooler than average. And by tomorrow for Friday, that's when we start to see that cold front that's coming from Canada. It's going to start to sneak in. So areas to the north starting to feel those changes, but a good majority of us still not going to be colder for Friday, especially where we're talking about those severe weather chances. But then as we head towards the weekend, that's when things officially do start to change. So as you look at these temperatures, you can see by 6 o'clock today, still sitting in the 60s and 70s for a lot of us to the south, 50s more towards the north and 40s. You're sitting at 44 in Detroit, 53 in Billings, 53 in Boise. Then tomorrow morning, it's not crazy cold. You're talking about some 40s and 30s mixing in. A lot of us in the 50s and 60s. Shreveport's sitting at 71. That's a pretty mild start for your Friday. Then you get towards Friday afternoon, 6 p.m. You can start to see really where that cold air is creeping in. At that point, you're seeing a lot of 30s now. Bismarck, you're at 38. Minneapolis, you're getting to 41. But the true cold doesn't arrive until going into Saturday. That's when those big changes start to occur. So you can see Saturday, that cold air is incoming. By Sunday, a huge chunk of us across the U.S. are seeing well below average temperatures. Again, you see that temperature departure from normal. We're going to be between 10 and 20 plus degrees colder than average. Some people are going to see a temperature change by about 30 to 40 degrees between Saturday and Sunday. Talk about a crazy change in temperatures. May impact, people might get a little sniffly too when you have those big kinds of changes. So this is your look at Sunday. Then you jump ahead towards Monday. Really at that point, you're kind of bisecting the U.S. in half. If you're to the east, you're going to be cold. The jacket is going to be your best friend. You may turn your heater on in your house. You may have your first fire of the season in your fire pit. If you're to the west, it's still going to be warmer than average. So unfortunately, places like Billings, Denver, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Portland, it's not going to be crazy cold. If you're waiting for the cold, you'll get it eventually, but it's just not going to be with this round of cold. And then Tuesday, still for a lot of the eastern half of the U.S., dealing with colder than average temperatures, but you can see that warm starts to creep back in. And by Wednesday, most of us are back to being pretty close to average, if not already back above average. So while it's a huge cold snap, it's going to be very chilly. It's not a very long-lasting cold snap. So you can look at these temperatures. This is by 9 o'clock Saturday morning, seeing a mixture of 50s and 40s. Areas to the north, you're sitting in the 30s. But then the cold will really start to creep in Saturday afternoon. Bismarck, you're at 25 degrees at 6 p.m. No, this is not a morning temperature. That's an afternoon temperature in the 20s. It's going to be very frigid. Then you get to 6 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. A lot of us starting off in the 40s, 45 in Oklahoma City, 36 in Kansas City, 30 in Billings and Rapid City, more 30s up closer to the Great Lakes, which is why we're watching for the chance for snow. But you get to Sunday evening and it's getting even colder. Now you're sitting at 39 in Oklahoma City, 42 in Memphis. Check out Florida from Sunday into Monday. You can see still sitting in the 60s and 70s. Now they're in the 40s Monday morning. That's very cold for Floridians, okay? They're going to definitely need a jacket. You're below freezing in Oklahoma City. You're sitting in the 20s in Kansas City, more 20s to the north. Wouldn't be shocked if maybe we even see some people getting in the teens with this cold snap. And then the big thing is too, Monday afternoon, you're really not warming up. This is showing you a high temperature on Monday at around 43 degrees in Oklahoma City, only the 40s and the 50s in northern parts of Florida. So again, that's chilly. You're at 39 in Memphis, 37 in Birmingham, 25 for the afternoon high temperature in Detroit. That's a little bit closer to that low pressure system. And that's also where they'll have to watch for the chance of snowfall, especially lake effect snowfall, as we go throughout the rest of this weekend and to the beginning of next week. You can even see Tuesday afternoons, things are still pretty chilly. At that point, a lot of us are starting to warm back up a little bit more though in the plains. And then as you head towards your Wednesday afternoon, that cold is leaving a lot of us. At that point, we start to warm back up. With all of the cold coming in, I want to show you that a lot of people could be talking about their first snow. When we looked at the radar earlier, you saw some of those snowfall totals kind of coming in. So here's a look by 6 p.m. Friday. Areas to the north, starting to see maybe a little bit of snow coming across the area. Then you get to Saturday at 6 o'clock. Now, a lot more people are talking about maybe seeing their first snowfall. This is not going to be super heavy. We're not talking about a major snowstorm here, but still maybe 1 or 2 inches possible in some locations. And then you can get towards Sunday. That's where you're talking about areas like Chicago. You may be dealing with lake effect snow, areas to the east of the lakes. Great Lakes, you can see that's where these snow totals are a little bit higher, just because they are expecting lake effect snow to start to kick in. And then Monday, kind of the same area you're talking about seeing more snowfall. Before we jump away from snow, a lot of people past peak now, you can see this brown shaded color. This is a current look at fall colors across the U.S. So where the snow is falling, you're not really going to have to worry about too much of killing the rest of those leaves on those trees. A lot of them have probably fallen off at this point. But you can see where areas are more red. That means they are at peak right now. This darker orange here, kind of central Oklahoma, like where we are here in Oklahoma City. Near peak, but we're not there just yet. This lighter orange, moderate color, so not quite to peak yet. And then this yellow is more patchy, not seeing huge changes. So we still have a little bit of a ways to go for seeing those peak fall colors for areas to the south, but that will quickly be changing as we go throughout the rest of November. May be a little bit weird for the trees though, because after this cold snap that we're going to deal with, a lot of people start to warm back up and they'll be back above average. So they might be a little bit confused on what season they're actually in. Here's that extended temperature outlook. This is valid November 11th through the 15th. So really going more from this weekend into next week. You're still seeing colder than average conditions expected across the eastern half of the U.S., but a lot of us here in the central and then western half of the U.S. So we're going to be talking about warmer than average conditions. And a lot of us are going to stay dry, especially St. Louis down to Atlanta and then parts of Texas too. And that's not a great sign to see just because a lot of people, I think more than 40% of the U.S. right now, dealing with drought actively. So to see more of these long-term weather patterns, talking about a lot of us continuing to stay drier than average where we should be, not the most promising sign. And of course, where we're expecting a little bit wetter than average conditions are areas that have already been seeing rainfall over the last several days due to all of those atmospheric rivers. Hey, before we wrap up today, again, does anybody have any questions, concerns, need me to go back and look at anything? Hopefully that forecast, it was a lot. I feel like it gave a lot to you, but hopefully it was easily digestible and talking about a lot of different things over the last few days. If you're getting those last weather questions, then I'll just remind everybody to follow us. We are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, just at HailTrace on all those platforms. We're always talking about fun weather things, fun weather facts as well. Today we're going to be posting about November tornadoes and statistically how often we talk about tornadoes in the kind of more fall-like season, how many years we've maybe had no tornadoes in November, what some of those record number of tornadoes in November are. So that's going to be on a lot of our social channels today. So make sure again that you are giving us a follow. And if you need a tornado, wind, or hail map, you can give us a call at 855-334-4245, or you can email us at info@hailtrace.com, or you can visit our website at www.hailtrace.com. It's always a great time too while the weather's a little bit nicer if you need to rework any areas that maybe you missed from hailstorms earlier on this year. Hey, thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll be back here tomorrow at the same time, same place, talking about all that forecast craziness with the severe weather chances Friday into the weekend. See you then.